Okay, and let's look at again checkpoint. I'm going to put it in text so you can actually see it. For the checkpoint, again, that's due by Thursday, and then Sunday the quiz. All right, for this chapter. All right. So, okay, when we think about network threats, there are quite a few actually. Now, you have to stop and think about when the network was created. And I think I mentioned this last time. When the network was, when the internet was created, when networks were created, well, actually, not networks, but the internet, uh, it was kind of an innocent affair. I mean, who would ever do bad things? That was basically the concept. It was very open, right? And and since then, obviously, they have seen the error of their thinking, error, and tried to do things to correct it. Now, networks, though, like with Novell, they learned to secure down business networks real quick. They were on top of it, but the internet not so much. But so I remember when back, when it first started coming out, some of the things now even before the internet came out and the network came out, we were dealing with viruses, not so much worms and not so much Trojan horses, but definitely viruses. Uh, and so you that was because a lot of people were bootlegging software back in the 90s, right? And that bootleg software often the maker would plant a particular type of virus so that if somebody used it without permission, it would activate the virus. So there was a lot of that kind of warfare going on, virus warfare. But when the internet came along and the viruses started, then people, different good or bad or jokesters or whatever the case might be, started making viruses. Man, they started taking down the internet down to its knees. I mean, literally, boom, boom, it was down because of some of the stuff, some of these viruses. I mean, the I love you virus or whatever it was. Oh my goodness, people were getting tricked into opening that up everywhere. It was like, oh yeah, okay. So it was bad. So we've had, and so, that's where your antivirus software started really kicking in, and the people were, the producers of it were really, learning ways to combat and detect and combat, these types of threats. Okay, and quarantine them, and still today, we still have that problem, but it's a lot. It's doesn't, you know, the antivirus software has gotten pretty good. So it's cleaned up quite a bit of it. But then came another phase. That was the phase of the worm. And the worm was based on macros in applications like Microsoft, Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, and so the macros were turned around and turned into malicious, software. And basically they did a lot of the same thing that the viruses were doing. And so that was yet another thing that the antivirus protectors had to protect against, as well as Microsoft. Uh, and then along came the people that were making Trojan horses. And these were your hacker groups. Okay, so now you had your hacker groups going at it, right? And sorry, hold on for 1 second. You had your hacker groups going at it, like the Cold of the Dead Cows. Look it up sometime. It's pretty amazing. But yeah, they were making these programs that there was this one, and this was I don't know, the early 2000s maybe, Whack-A-Mole. I don't know if anybody remembers it. Maybe they don't. Maybe you do. It was where the little game, and people were just wild about downloading these little games. It wasn't like the gaming today. It was completely different thing. It was just like tiny little games, just amusements, right? And you would just basically you'd use your mouse as a hand, and it would activate a little hammer that would these moles would pop up through, come up out of the ground. It was like a little scene of a ground, and you had these ground moles, popping up, and so the job was to for you to whack. But now, what happened with this game? Users were downloading this game, right? But behind the scenes, it was also downloading what's called the Trojan horse, right? And still, this kind of thing happens today, still with Trojan horses. You click on these phishing links and such, and they can download a Trojan horse or even, viruses or whatever. But the Trojan horse, what it does is once it's on your machine, then it sends out a request to its master. So you basically have a whole network of these, bots that are out there with master bots that are controlling the compromised machine bots that are on your machines. So this Trojan horse would reach out to its master bot, and so then the master bot would tell it whatever what it should do, or you know, it would use the resources of the computer, or maybe it would direct your computer, or even web TV now, or other things to direct an attack, maybe on some website. See, so that's where the Trojan horses come in. And still today, that's where a lot of this phishing is planting these Trojan horses that are taking over your machines. Uh, so yeah, even your TVs. Uh, in addition, then we have spyware. And so you have programs that are being planted on your machine that actually are watching what you're doing. Even keystroke loggers, they can actually watch exactly the keys that you're using. And so, hey, there go your passwords. Yeah, and adware, even it's horrible. And even today, it's horrible. And a lot of them use JavaScript, by the way. And it can actually, if your page slows down because of some of them, it's poorly written. Or maybe it's attacking the resources on your machine. Could be. Sorry. You never know. And of course, you've got the actual physical hacker attacks, the hackers that are trying to break into things. Usually that's more of a business issue. Not always, but I mean, it depends. If you're a special person, they want your stuff. They might try to get into you, or just for fun. A lot of times, or even just to see if they can, or compromise, or just to see who you are, or whatever. You know, and we have to discern between what a hacker and a cracker is. A hacker is just a person that's breaking in, right? A cracker is a person that does malicious stuff. Okay, so realize there are some differentiating terms there. Okay. A denial of service attack, when I talk about here, is so maybe your machine and 10,000 other machines get compromised, right? They have these programs, these Trojan horse programs now. And so the master controller might say, okay, I want you to start sending out what's called a ping request. Okay. And what a ping request does is it sends out a request to a website to answer back, basically, just so that you know that it's there. But you can set up these ping requests to go over and over and over and over and over. So your machine might be continue asking, "Are you there? Are you there? Are you there?" And happening. Boom, 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 boom. Now it's not just your machine; it's the 10,000 other machines that all at once do the same thing to that website. So what's going to happen to that server? It's going to get so flooded that it's either going to stop working, it's going to fill up, or maybe it'll exceed its memory in some way, depending on the type of attack. And it could actually open up a pathway for a hacker then to go into the machine. That's a lot of times what they hope for, is to flood it. Sometimes it's just to deny people from using their site. Or maybe somebody's getting threatened, that, okay, if you don't do what I'm telling you, we're going to take your site down. So, there's that kind of thing going on too. Uh, Data interception. So yeah, don't think it's not happening to you, because it very well can happen. And that's where you send out information over the internet and somebody can step in between and grab it. So if they're on the same line as you are, so maybe it's on the same, networks. Maybe you've got a shared network line, or maybe you're sharing, on maybe you've got like an ISP that's giving you a common shared line. it's possible, it can be possible to actually what we call sniff and actually see the information that's flowing, with some of the software that's out there. And they can actually grab, and they can actually, if you say you went into your bank, right? So you logged into your bank, and then they could actually intercept that and then turn around and act as you, and then blockade you and make your machine think, give errors to your machine. And meanwhile, they're working, in whatever site you went to, right? So that's where you're getting data interception, theft, and that kind of thing. And of course, we got the big thing about identity theft. And so, especially if your machine gets compromised, they can gain a lot of information in there about you, and they can pretend to be you. And they can then, of course, start taking out loans in your name and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, that's where it really gets bad with identity theft, which is why you should keep an eye on your credit reports. Okay, all three of them. All right, you should keep an eye regularly on those things. All right, or have a service that does it for you. Okay, so yeah, there's no single arrangement. You basically got to use a lot of different kinds of stuff to get it now to protect you. I don't know. I use Microsoft's built-in antivirus. Has it protected me? I don't. It seems to have. Uh, the firewall filtering works pretty good. I do a lot of blockading with my own hardware or with my wireless firewalls. I actually have a double network inside my home. So just you can do a lot of different kind of things to actually protect. And just to give you a tip here, let's see if I can find it. A site that you might go to. Let's move this out of the way. Let's see if I could go out there. So let's see. The site you might go to is let's see, the Kern CPRN. Let me see if that's it. I'm trying to pull it out of my. Let's see. It's the National Cyber Site. Let's try that. I think it's Kern or something like that. Let's see. National Cybersecurity Alliance. There it is, right here. CISA. All right. CISA.gov. I really recommend you go here. Seriously. I mean, this has a ton of good information for personal as well as business. Okay. Uh, really, spend some time here. You'll learn a lot. Uh, and so, and again, it's CISA.gov, right? And so you can actually, there's groups you can go into, there's discussion boards, they can alert you to different things that are going on. And there's even, there's resources here that you can use. For instance, okay, let's look. Training, for instance. Uh, Also other resources. Let's look here. Uh, okay, there was a personal audience. Okay, let's go audience home. Let's see if we can find home. Small business. Okay, so you got a small business. Okay, so we go here, right? Small business. Okay, so now some resources. Well, of course, there's those kinds, but there's also there's some network stuff. You can probably take this down to a topic and then go, yeah, cybersecurity best practices. There you go. For business, small businesses. Okay, so there. Guidance to protect their network edge devices. So, like your routers. How do you protect your routers? There's just all kind, and you can, could drill down more. You can filter it more with, more of these checkboxes and such. To actually hone into exactly the kind of uh, questioning and there's a lot of go how-to guides, how-tos, and step-by-step procedures and that kind of things in here. So it's an excellent site, and really take your time to browse around this. I think you'll be impressed. All right. Anyway, okay. So we do need to think in terms of both for home and small office, as well as bigger corporate networks. And so there are differences in them. And a lot of it has to do with how much money you have, quite frankly. If you're a small business, what are you going to use? You're going to use a wireless router, right? Probably if you're like mom and pop store. But you really should learn how to, uh, you know, to get in there and program that wireless router so that it really helps protect you. All right. And you should make sure that you've got, when I'm talking about really protect you, I'm talking about you need to learn how to set up that firewall and that MAC filtering on that wireless router. You'll have to go to that router. You have to go whoever makes it. You're gonna have to find the documentation, and even AI can help you a lot, by the way. It can help you, configure these things. So just make sure you double check the information from AI. But in a large now, if you're training for the job, you might be training right now. This might be a class that you're taking so that you can train to be an IT or a network person at a corporation or a bigger company. So, you might there are actual physical devices that are dedicated to being firewalls at the edges of a business network. Okay, you have a lot. You have like Cisco has devices where you can set up access control lists that really regulate the traffic about who can do what and who can go where on your network. Okay, and it's not just Cisco. There's other vendors as well too. Uh, and of course, you have intrusion prevention systems where it'll actually, now with the artificial intelligence too, it'll actually detect if somebody's trying to break in or do bad stuff on your network and report it to you. It can even alert you on your phone, and send a message. And, if you're an IT person, hey, your network's getting hit, man. You better get in here. You better find out what's going on, you know. And also, ways to protect are you can actually create tunnels, virtual private networks, if you actually have people that are working remotely. And that's yet another subject. Okay. So there's a lot of areas if you're getting into the job and they're pretty interesting areas and they're pretty complex. And, you know, you can, uh, you can actually you can make a career out of this stuff. You know, you still got to take the people, even when the AI is there. Okay. When we talk about, you know, uh, security, we're talking about basically, 30 things to keep in mind, and that's called the triad. Keep the information confidential. In other words, only let people see the information that are allowed to see the information, right? For instance, medical records. Who should be allowed to see your medical record? Well, there are only certain people are allowed to see your medical record. John Q. Doe from the public can't just come in and look at it, right? So it has to remain confidential. Uh, Integrity. We need to make sure that the information is not changed unless it's been authorized to be changed. And this is a real problem. This is a serious issue, especially when it comes to government websites and hackers changing information on government websites. You know, if you don't maintain the integrity of the information, it can really cause issues. And even for a business, for instance, maybe you've got your contracts parked somewhere on some server. Maybe a hacker comes in and changes the language in the contracts. now, now you've got some real issues going on, right? And so confidentiality. Only people that are allowed to see it are allowed to see it. Integrity. We should not allow it to be changed unless it's authorized to be changed. And then availability. And comes to, you know, how available should the information be? How critical is it? For instance, Amazon website. If uh, if it goes down, it that becomes unavailable. They're losing billions of dollars, probably, every hour, but maybe minutes. But so availability of information is critical in many cases. Even if, especially if it's like life-threatening types of information that needs to be available at all times. So who can see it? Who should be allowed to see it? You know, who should control changes? And how available? When should I be able to get it? So those are those are the things that when we're thinking security, we need to make sure are maintained. Okay, and they talk more here about it. Yeah, and they talk about some threats, like hijacking, and that does still happen. People get ransomed, as people get their machines taken over and ransomed a lot. It happens, it still happens. I hear reports of it all the time. Uh, of course, you've got different countries that are hacking. You've just heard probably recently about the the Iranian type thing, but we're probably you never know. We might be doing the same thing to them. Of course, there's a lot of financial gain hacking going on. You know, this is especially black market area where, like with the Trojan horses, they're actually selling. For instance, they'll use your machine, they'll sell off your CPU power that, believe it or not, you're hardly using your CPU at all. And so, when they take over your machine, they can actually sell the unused CPU power of your machine and everybody else that they've compromised, for financial gain. But there's other types of things too. Uh, you know, that's where the hijacking too comes in. Okay. So, and they talk about how secure is the Internet of Things. They're not. They're not. Yeah, and that's like, your wristband. Actually your watch, whatever your Apple, it can it be broken into? Don't doubt it. Because, hacks are out there. And then all of a sudden you've got, your car broken in. I'm waiting for the day when somebody's going to think that it's really funny to hack into cars at a roundabout and make them go round and around and around. It's not, I wouldn't doubt it. It probably, that might, you never know. You never know. Uh, so those are things that you got to think of. Okay. Now, also with information security, there's some other things that we have to think about. One, and this is what you're dealing with all the time nowadays. So if you want to log into a site, a lot of times you have to put your password, username, and password, right? Then you got to turn around, you got to go to your phone, and you got to get the code or whatever, right? Okay, so now we're dealing with these things here. First off, authentication. We need to make sure that the people that are accessing the resources for the business or for you or your personal resources or whatever, the people that are accessing the computerized resources, we need to make sure, first off, that they are who they say they are. It depends how critical this information is, of course. If it's plain old public information, of course, it's not so critical. But say they're logging into your site. Say you're selling access to something that that's valuable or worthwhile or whatever. So they got to log in. So they have to supply something to prove they are who they are, right? Now, when we think about how do we prove who we are, right? There's kind of things it's the things that can do this, that can help do this are things you know, things you have, and things you are. Okay. So things you know, things you have, and things you are. So things you know, that's your password, username. You know those. So therefore, that's a way of authenticating who you are because you know your password and username. Okay. So that in part, that helps authenticate. It used to be great for a while, but nowadays it's come to the point where we have to do a second thing. Things you have, and that's your phone. And that's where if you lose your phone, man, you're hit these days. But things you have. So that's where you do your double authentication, where you log in with the user password and they say, okay, we're sending you a code to your phone. Okay, so it's the phone is something you have. And so they're verifying it's you because you're signed up with the phone company for that phone. So therefore, if you send that code back, then you're verifying based on something you have. Right. Now, then we can go even deeper. And that's where a lot of times we're doing like these thumbprints and that kind of thing on the computer. They have the thumbprint readers and such. Okay, that's something you are. So retina scanners, fingerprint readers. I just went to Walt Disney here this winter, and they made me use my fingerprint. I gave them my pinky. Now you can have my pinky print. Okay, but they let me do it. But yeah, things that you are, right? So those so we're authenticating. We're authenticating that we're proving we are who we are. right? And there can be other things that you can use, right? So you could use specialized cards that have specialized chips in them, yeah, right? Or you could have specialized, what we call dongles that you can plug in, all right? That's things you have. Okay. Then once we get in, we need to make sure that uh, people can only do what they're supposed to be or get access to what they're supposed to be getting access to. And that's where we start setting permissions on the files. So, for instance, say we have these users, right? So we can say that Jay Smith is only allowed to look at, only allowed to read. He's not allowed to copy it. He's only allowed to look at it, read it. Okay. But this person is allowed to look at it, right? Also, change it, basically, write to it, change it, right? So they can add and they can delete it, right? But this person here, they can only look at it or change it, basically, right? So that's where we're getting into access control. That and don't confuse that with network access control. That's a completely different thing altogether. Okay, this is file access control list, right? Uh, then you have role based, of course. You could actually set up, okay, we're going to say that that John J. Smith and R. Lee, we're gonna give put them in the reader group. And so anybody in the reader group is going to have permission to read, right? We'll set up M. Roberts and M. Anderson. We'll put those in the editor, right? And so they can do these two things. So that we don't have to put individual permissions on the person. We just set it on the group and then assign the person to the group, right? Uh, so we can do that. Well, okay, so yeah, that that basically explains it. Now, encryption, that's another way to protect things. And basically, when it comes down to it, encryption is you take some information, some data, and you mangle it in a special way that you could turn around and unmangle it at the other end, right? So you take the information, you mix it all up, but you know how it got all mixed up. You know what procedure happened to get it mixed up, right? And so you have a key that you use that determines how it got mixed up. That's one way to do it. There's other ways. But so you can pass that key along to whoever's on the other end. So when they get the information, they can use that key to unmix it up in reverse, right? Because they know how it was done on this end, so they can reverse it or on this end using the key. Okay. And it's done mathematically, but that's just one example of doing encryption. There are other ways. Okay. Uh, you could have a matching type public private keys that work like for encoding and decoding, right? So now when we've talked about passwords, my best advice to you is come up with a story. And basically, if you come up with a story for your passwords, then you can, for every site you go to, you can modify your story and then use that story for that password for that site. And that way you don't have to use these password rememberers on your browsers, which can get compromised. They do get compromised a lot. So I don't use a password rememberer. I have a story. I've got a story set up. And so for each website I go to, hundreds of websites, I have a way of actually, remembering what the password is for each different website. It's a different password for every website based on the story that I have created, so that it's unique enough so that I know what the password is going to be for each site. Okay. So uh, that's the best way. So you need to make sure they're complex. Okay, so when we talk about complex passwords too, capital letters, small letters, special characters like and symbol. Sometimes they don't let you use that, uh, but different kinds of symbols. So capital, small, symbol, numbers. Okay, that's basically your combinations that you need for good complex passwords. Okay, you need to change them often if it's going to be secure. And you also need to train your employees. Don't write the password on the monitor on a sticky. So eh, they do. They put it in the drawer. Yeah, don't do that. Let's see, backups. Yeah, make sure you've got some data to support. So make sure that you understand how to go about backing it up. And as an IT person, you will learn different ways to do it. Okay. Oftentimes we'll back up the entire thing, then we'll turn around and just do whatever got changed, like today, whatever got changed the next day, whatever you got. And then at the end of the week, we'll do maybe a full backup again, or maybe we'll do whatever got changed for the week. So there's different ways. And then when you store stuff, you can store it locally, and just to make sure, in case of an incident, like a flood or whatever, you might want to store your information backed up, maybe offsite somewhere. So, or maybe like with these large companies, they distribute it globally. You know, so and test it. Don't forget to test it to make sure it does actually, when you back it up, you can actually restore it. That actually is a problem, believe it or not. Okay, let's see. Firewalls. Yeah, I kind of talk. It's basically you're blocking. So you've got when software was made, basically with computing and the internet and such, we have like pathways. So if you have a program, it'll hook onto a certain number between 1 and 65,535. It'll pick, it depends on what it's doing, but it'll attach the number. And so when you send out your request to somebody, the answer coming back will use that number to route you to your application. Okay, so that's basically a port number. It sends it to you, or it sends it to your application that initiated the conversation. Basically, that's it. And so firewalls are used to blockade ports so that people aren't asking improperly to access applications via those ports. Only the only way it should happen is if your application on your end requested it in the first place out the door. Okay, so that's essentially in a nutshell, with how the firewalls are working. And don't forget about physical security. I don't know how many times I've seen closet doors open with all the network cables and connections. It's like I can't believe the IFT guys left those open like that. They're totally exposed. The port underneath the couch in the lobby where somebody can sit down and plug in with an RJ45 jack, it's still connected to your network and nobody thought about because it's in the lobby and somebody put a couch in front of it. You know, that's physical security. Make sure the doors are locked in critical areas, things like that. Common sense stuff. A lot of times that just don't, people just don't think. They're busy, they get in a hurry. Still you gotta be stalwart in making sure that things are secured for your business. You know, don't get lazy. And there's always, policies that are for employees and everybody else that should be abided to, created, and your business should create these, and so you'll have them on file for people to understand and read and comply with, right? So, and also that applies to mobiles. In mobile security, that's really a way for people to get into your network. Say you've got uh, maybe you've got a program that hooks into your network that's on your mobile device, and now somebody can compromise your phone, and now they can get into your network. So you got to be careful there as well. Yeah. So make sure too that you do not, unless you absolutely have to, give out these things. And I know those sites are all asking for birthdays. I wouldn't give them your birthday unless you really had to. Seriously, because that's serious way for them to get compromise, your personal information identity. So be careful there. Be real careful, and especially these, your bank account number and your credit card. You wouldn't be giving that away. It's horrible that people are still asking for social security numbers. They really shouldn't be doing that. All right, that's like not good. And talk about don't even use a government ID. And even your street address can be used to compromise you. When you fill out applications for loans, what are they looking for? Yeah, think of it that way. All right. Protect it as best you can. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we got here. So Yeah, you, if you get into cyber, you might be the great defenders. Okay. So you you will be the ones that are out there fighting the good fight to try to prevent all this insecurity from happening to your business. And it will keep you busy. I guarantee you. It is a fast evolving field that is dynamic, changes constantly, and you just never know. And it can wake you up in the middle of the night and you have to go deal with it. So, uh, so there's lots of different ways to help you, you know, yeah, especially log files. So if you're like, and you've got programs that can read the log files, and you have AI programs that can read the log files and alert you when things are going on as well. So, you know, there's other types of things as well here that you can use, that will help you manage the security of your business. So just take time to kind of think about these things that are listed there. Uh, Yeah, I already talked about availability. One of the things, the big thing is a lot of these websites, they brag, but this is true. I mean, when you think, and so the brag is, can you get 7 nines, right? So in other words, out of 1 year, only your website's only down 3.15 seconds in 1 year. Okay. That's the 7 nines. It's up this percent of the time. Okay. Now I go down here. If it's up 99.8% of the time, that means that there can be 17.52 hours of downtime. Now, this is serious. This can add up to a lot of money, depending on the site. So, you know, it is possible that you might be required to abide by, and for profitability, a higher level of availability. Okay. And that's pretty much it for this. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop this. Uh, well, I guess there's no discussion, right? There's just a check and there's a quiz. And so that's pretty much it. Here, I'm gonna stop sharing. Let's see, is anybody here? Nope, nobody's here. All right, so I will push this out and publish this for you guys to view, and hopefully it helps in whatever ways that it can. Okay, and you all take care this week, and have a great week.